Good to be with you today. This is our second video on belonging. And in the first video, I talked about belonging, and I think there's a kind of hypnotic belief that belonging, the experience of belonging, has to do with how we're favored or not favored on the outside, meaning whether society says a yes, we can belong, or a no, we can't belong. So whether you're in this group or that group, it feels like others have the power to say yes or no, and that's true in many circumstances. But that feeling that we have of belonging actually is dependent on some other factors. So I want to use the metaphor. This is kind of probably strange, but what if we use the metaphor of an ulcer? So an ulcer, I've never had one. Well, I've had heartburn. I think that's similar. I'm not sure. But an ulcer is kind of a burning and a stomach distress, right? And I think it can be irritated or made worse by either spicy food or Aleve and aspirin, too much of that. But the thought is that it's caused by a bacterial infection. It can be caused by the aspirin or the Aleve, or it can be irritated through the aspirin, Aleve, or spicy food. But belonging, first of all, let me say that it's extremely human. I mean, extremely mean it would be a rare person, probably close to everyone, that desires to be part of something. Even a hermit, even someone who is very withdrawn, they're part of people who are withdrawn, or they're part of rejecting life. And in some way, they desire to belong to something. Maybe it's the woods. Maybe it's something esoteric. But I've not met or heard of anyone that doesn't have, in some way, a desire to belong. So I want to say and put to rest one thing. And I want to read from one sentence from Brené Brown, Atlas of the Heart. And most of us who read or studied Brené Brown are quite in love with her. And interestingly, before I read this sentence, she had a big experience of not belonging. When she first wrote her books, no publisher wanted to publish books on shame. I found out in the 1980s when I tried, and I did teach about shame, and it was John Bradshaw's work. People would feel ashamed just hearing the word shame, and they would recoil and not want to know about it, because the feeling of unworthiness makes a person want to hide and disconnect. And it's such a soulful wound, because it's a belief that who you are is not good enough. it's not as high a workable feeling as guilt, because guilt, if you made a mistake, you can make reparations, you can ask for forgiveness, you can go to jail and have reparations. There are things you can do. Yes, it's not a pleasant feeling, but when you feel like your very essence is somehow icky, then it doesn't feel doable. So most people just try to hide it. Well, we're supposed to be talking about belonging, but I don't think we can talk about belonging without an understanding, once again, of unworthiness. Now, maybe this is just my thing, and indulge me if it is. When I'm done with this video and one more, you can decide if I'm all wet or if there is something, a kernel even, for you to open doors with this understanding. Because if I'm talking to you, chances are you've had a feeling now and again or every day that you wished you belonged more. So let me read this sentence from, I was going to tell you that story about Brene Brown. So none of the publishers would publish her work, that they thought nobody would be interested, really, until she did that TEDx talk and it went viral. Did anybody believe she had worth, or she had anything to say? Or they, now Brene can publish anything she wants and command any stage and probably any amount of money. But that wasn't always the case. So they did have the power to say no to her. But she went around with her books in her car and got bookstores to start selling them until she had her breakthrough. So if we believe that we're unworthy when we get a no, what is that? That is that underlying belief in unworthiness. Picture, I have a slide for this, but I'm not going to show it here. Picture Martin Luther King, and someone said no to him. What would his posture be? Somehow he had used belonging uncertainty that came from the culture. And there's this word, belonging uncertainty. And Brene says, in research, belonging uncertainty is the term sometimes used to describe questioning one's social belongingness. Belonging uncertainty can be high among members of marginalized groups, and this can have real consequences, of course. So that's what I want to be saying. With racism, with sexism, with transgender, all kinds of bias and marginalization. There are just so many words to bring up about groups that are not allowed to have full access to power. I'm not denying that. And I'm 100% in favor of anything that can be done to make access to all of life an equal opportunity. But we have to put that aside unless this becomes a political group. This is more for, I'm addressing people who want to belong and are willing to look inside to see if there is anything I'm doing that prevents me from having that experience of belonging. So the experience of belonging is beyond someone on the outside giving me access with a yes. Of course, a yes feels good. If I want to be part of this group, a yes feels good, but it's temporary. And a person will not keep that feeling of belonging to life. And this is a teaser for video number 3. In video number 3, I'm going to talk about a term I've come up with called quantum belonging. It's a knowing that you have a home in this world that is beyond the yes or no that you get from the outside. And the belonging in this world is not the outer world. The outer world is going to have yeses and nos for everyone. We see this with presidents and Congress people. Sometimes they're voted in, sometimes they're voted out. And even when they're voted in, sometimes people go against their own beliefs in order to keep belonging. It's not a permanent state unless we find quantum belonging. Maybe I'll have to try and talk about that now, and we'll see if we need a third video. Have I said enough about what you need to hear right here? Let's go back to that metaphor of the ulcer. If we just look at how we feel when we have a condition of ulcer stomach and we eat spicy food and we have an attack or an episode, that's like believing in the hypnosis that that experience of belonging is in the power of the outer world, because it seems like we felt fine until we ate this spicy food. Well, indeed, the spicy food did happen and irritate the stomach. But there was, let's say, a bacterial infection causing that irritation that was not experienced until the attack from the spicy food or the Advil or the aspirin, and that can also cause it. So maybe there's something to be learned there too, because if I believe I'm unworthy, do you think that can be mirrored in the world where people are more likely to say no to me? Right. I mean, we know that people's ultimate fate is not dependent on their personal reflections and their personality. How many Jews died when they felt they belonged, but there was a Nazi system that said, you're out? What about slavery? Same thing. So it's not a one-to-one that if you feel like you belong, your fate is bigger than your personal life. If there's supposed to be a storm in life, that's bigger than any tree's health, let's say. If the tree is part of a big storm, a hurricane, it's going to have its effect because of the hurricane. So there are different levels that we're talking about, but let's stick with that metaphor. It's really hard when we have this pervasive belief that that feeling of belonging comes from the outside, whether it's bestowed on us or not. So I think you see it with the ulcer experience. If there's no spicy food, for a while, a person might have the experience of health, even though they have an ulcer that has not shown up, even though it hasn't been activated. But that infection is still there. So I'm really saying that, and remember, I'm not disavowing the pervasive, harmful effects of racism and Nazism and all of these outside pluses or minuses. If you get to be voted in, that's a plus. If you get voted out, that's a minus. Yes, that's there, but we're not talking about that. We're digging deeper under that hypnosis that it's all about the outside. And let me tell you how I know for sure that it's something of the inside that can make the difference. And that's all I'm saying. A belief, and it's more than a belief, it's a knowing of our connection that's not based on our worth. That's the tricky part. Came to me. Once again, I keep on referring to this experience because it was life-changing in so many ways that I have to keep on talking about it. So that experience when Melissa died, I was ready to walk into the horizon. And instead, I got the experience of being shaken and knowing an okayness that I had never known. And what is that okayness? It wasn't, oh, you did this so well, or you're such a good person, or you're pretty, or you're slim, or you're tall, or you're this, or you're that, you're an artist, you're smart, you're whatever. No, it wasn't anything specific. Matter of fact, it was the lack, the leaving of the mind that evaluates your worth. It was a kind of nothingness, like when you're falling asleep, you leave your worth, you leave your mind, you leave your day, and you relax backward and backward until you're almost asleep, but you're still awake. Go with me there. Remember that feeling. And there's a deep desire to sleep. When we're sleep deprived, we don't feel well. That's because we enter this place where the mind is released. The mind is where the suffering is. Horrible things can happen in the world, and they still are horrible, but we add to them with the meaning that we make of them. My life's never going to go right. Nothing ever good happens. Why do these things always happen to me? Other people, this and that, whatever you want to say. The looping thoughts that go back to past and future make whatever happened that was unpleasant worse. That is what causes psychological suffering. It's the mind. But when we release the thoughts and feelings, meaning when we understand that some thoughts and feelings are hurtful, we can develop an interest in disengaging and saying, oops, there's the looping. Oops, that's a subject that's not for me. I know where it goes. When we're able to do that, what is it that happens that is a relief? We're going backwards into something freeing that's really not about us. When you fall asleep, go there with me, you leave your day, you're no longer you, really. You've left all the personal, and your mind is not thinking. So you're neither connected or disconnected. And when you're not connected or disconnected is the place you actually belong. When you think of connection, it's so cozy, it feels so good. I'm connected to you, I'm connected to everyone. Or whatever you do to pray or whatever that has that conscious connection. But in the nothingness, you 100% belong. You're present. You know you're still alive. There's nothing wrong. You're not missing anything. We haven't learned to value this place. Society has only taught us that what we do when we're in the noise, that's valuable. This is the quiet. And then we have the dream states. And then we have the deep sleep that has left even all that's personal. In the dream, there's still things happening. A person, it may be you, it may be someone else, and they're doing. But in that deep sleep, we enter that quantum field, and we enter it very much like when we leave our day. That's what Rumi meant when he said, in that field beyond right doing and wrong doing, I'll meet you there, and I'll meet you there in belonging. Bye for now.